That's right, power scaling time. Peep this. Eric of the Red Force podcast posted this on his Twitter page, and I quote, "How people think power scaling in One Piece works versus how it actually is." So the left side in blue, you have power going up. You have Katakuri at the very bottom of an exponential curve. Then you have Roger in the middle of that curve. And they have Joyboy at the very top of that curve. That is the incorrect side. But on the right side, you have the correct side, where you have an S curve, where you have Katakuri in the center of the S curve. Then you have Roger at the very top of this curve. And they have Joyboy next to Roger, but slightly ahead of Roger in that S curve. So what he's saying here, essentially, based on these curves, is that Katakuri is a far cry from Goldie Roger in combat ability. But according to the left curve, Joyboy is exponentially much stronger than Roger, where Roger has absolutely no chance, not a single hope at all. He would get low diff crushed because it's exponentially going up, right? So Roger would have no chance at all at beating Joyboy because Joyboy in a one-on fight However, on the right side, it's the same with Katakuri. Katakuri is a far cry from Roger, but Roger is not a far cry from Joyboy in terms of power. Where if Roger and Joyboy fought in a fight, 1v1, Roger would lose that fight, but it would still be a difficult W for Joyboy to get over Roger, considering how, yes, Joy was ahead of Roger, but he's not that much ahead of Roger. This, I think, is a very intriguing perspective on how to view power scaling One Piece, and I would say it is more correct for sure than the one on the left side, where people, and they love to do the whole power cliffing thing, where once new characters are introduced, the old characters are automatically just cliffed, i.e. ulti being stronger than Katakuri, pointing to a certain someone, shots to Hime, but pointing to people that believe that idea. A lot of power in One Piece is based on hearsay. A lot of times we don't see characters actually do stuff, and we just hear about their accolades, or let's say in the past, when they were in their primes versus how they are now, they are weaker when they're older, but they're still devastating fighters. When it comes to characters in power in One Piece, there is a lot of ambiguity. It is part of the joy of the story too, where you're not too sure on certain things, and so it kind of leaves the imagination open to kind of flourish on how they operated in the past, how they are now, if they haven't fought a single time yet, things of that sort, right? A good example is, let's say, someone like Garling. Figureland Garling is probably a very strong individual, despite his old age, especially now that he's in the good graces of Emu after Jay got nixed. But in the past, when he squared up against the Roger Pirates and the Rocks Pirates when they invaded God Valley. So even though Garling fought against some of the strongest people in One Piece history during God Valley, he may not be as strong back then as he is now that he's under the good graces of Emu. Someone like Dragon too. Dragon's power level is all over the place. Absolutely it is, right? Mihawk, who has a lot of feats in the pre-time skip, but for the most part, they've been casual. So how strong is he when he actually goes all out? So like, there are various things about interpreting power scaling in the story, and because it's such a long story, I think over the course of time, not only do the fans' views of power ebb and flow and change, but also you can argue Oda's views of power ebb and flow and change for various characters and how he views them. But I think that when it comes to the top tiers of One Piece, and this is where I think I agree with Eric a lot, when it comes to these pinnacle people, I do believe that they actually are closer than what folks would first think. Where a lot of times people, actually I would say the vast majority of One Piece fans, they do tend to, I think, overinflate the powers of the old era compared to the new era. As if like in the new era, people couldn't match folks of the old era. For example, Prime Garp or Prime Whitebeard is crushing every top tier in the story now. So they would crush a current day Mihawk, or a current day Kuzan, or a current day Luffy, or a current day Akainu, Blackbeard, and so on and so forth. Let me get like right to the end game here. Let me just jump ahead, okay? I see a future in the story where Luffy is the strongest character in One Piece history. Not just the old heads of today's day and age, so the Rayleighs and their prime, same for Garp, and same for Whitebeard and Roger and the Gold Line Shiki and so on, but also cats from the Void Century. So I'm talking about the Emus and the Joyboys even. I can see Luffy being even stronger than Joyboy at his peak, because ultimately Luffy is going to succeed where even Joyboy failed. Remember that one line in chapter 1122 when a meth says, "I'm sorry, Joyboy, sorry that I couldn't make you king"? I don't think that's gonna happen with Frankie. No. I don't think that's gonna happen with any of the Straw Hat crew. They're not gonna say, "Sorry, we couldn't make you king, Luffy." No, Luffy will be king. Where Joyboy failed, Luffy will succeed. He will succeed. And in doing so, I'd argue solidifying himself as being the numero uno of all time, the number one. That, of course, is hearsay for the future. What actual evidence do I have to support my claim that the old heads at their max powers are not that far ahead, if at all, from the current top tiers of the story One Piece? So I would say in the current meta, it would be people like Shanks, Akainu, Dragon, Blackbeard, Kaido, Big Mom, Kuzan, Luffy, Mihawk, folks like that. That's our view in the current top tier of the story. Though I would argue personally that when it comes to the number one, number twos of the story right now, so arguably Emu, and I would say Shanks, guaranteed, there is a gap, at least with Shanks. There's a gap between Shanks and most other characters in the story. But that's neither here nor there, because we're talking about the groups as a whole. We're talking about Luffy's current era, we're talking about Shanks' era, we're talking about Roger's era, we're talking about Joyboy's era, these groups collectively. Here's where we get Exhibit A. Let's go back to more recent information here. We find out in chapter 1123 that when a meth undoes the Haki knot, the giants Dory and Brogy compare that to Shanks' Haki, and they are not too sure, based on the official translations and other reputable folks that also do translations and so on, that Shanks' Haki is comparable to Joyboy's Haki. Not even anyone from Roger's era has ever gotten that comparison. That is the most recent primary example of the current top tiers compared to mythical class dudes like Joyboy. Now mind, to be fair, Joyboy has an entire Devil Fruit power to utilize, unlike Shanks, as far as you know. Maybe Shanks has some there, but I digress. Shanks has comparable Haki to Joyboy. He is the only character in the story when it comes to power outside of Luffy who is comparable to Joyboy. Luffy doesn't have the same actual ability. It does solidify the idea, though, that the current top tiers are not that far off on the S-curve from the top tiers of old, even ancient history top tiers. If Roger was the strongest of his generation, and if Joyboy was the strongest of his generation, I would say that Shanks is the strongest of his generation. And if we use Eric's correct model, the S-curve model, I would say that Shanks' dot would be relative to the dots of Joyboy and Roger. And Shanks, I think, validates that in a similar way when he does the Wi-Fi Haki to Green Bull. The same way that the Haki of Joyboy forced the elders to de-transform and sent packing back, wrapped up, express package back to the Holy Land, is in the same vein where Shanks did the Haki straitjacket Wi-Fi and forced Green Bull to power down, hands up, don't shoot. So you've seen it arguably from the not only portrayal side, but also in terms of feats, Shanks and Joyboy are comparable in the Haki game. But we don't just have to glaze Shanks to also make an example of the old heads compared to the current top tiers. And for me, there was one particular moment way before Shanks did what he did that proved to me that yes, in fact, the current top tiers can tango in extreme diff fights with the old prime dudes. The old prime Garps and the prime Rayleighs and the prime Scoppers and the prime Rogers and so on. People like Kaido and Big Mom, even current Luffy, though not as good as those two, I'd argue, not yet at least. And of course, Blackbeard and Shanks, they can absolutely tango, in some cases beat the top tiers of old. And the thing that really swayed me in this direction was comparing chapter 966 to chapter 1011. What we see is the exact same thing from two sets of parties. One was during the Odin flashback. In 966, you know what it is? Roger and Whitebeard clash for the first time on screen, on panel. And we see they're not even touching. Tremendous amounts of Conqueror's Haki fill the area. An absolutely epic scene in both manga and in anime. Phenomenal. And at the time, we had seen nothing like that. We had seen no one in real time ever perform and even close, even moderately close to what Roger and Whitebeard displayed in the Odin flashback until chapter 10-11 dropped. In chapter 10-11, Luffy and Kaido proceed to do the exact same thing. Luffy goes for a kick, Kaido swings his club, we have the Conqueror's Haki on their attacks, and then you see that big bolt that serves the panel, and you see the big bolts that shoot across the entire upper area of Onigashima, and we see the rays from the horns and so on and so forth. It's damn near the same thing that we saw Roger and Whitebeard do in the Odin flashback. Haki bolts over the island, and then the rays going from the clouds. In Luffy and Kaido's case, Haki bolts over the island, and then the rays going across the horns in the sky. It's the same thing. Once I saw that, I thought it was, okay, hold on, time out. We have to consider the idea that just because Roger and Whitebeard are in the 5 billion berries of bounty, and just because they have legacies that are more impactful so far than Luffy's, and of course Kaido's, that doesn't mean that Kaido is getting diffed in a one-on-one fight versus Roger or versus Whitebeard. And in fact, it is canon, but I don't necessarily adhere to it just because of my own personal takes and opinions on this matter, but I think it only confirms if they did fight, it would be extreme diff, tooth and nail, like it'd be an extremely close fight. Akainu versus Aokiji, 10 days, some of that sort, 20 days in this case here. And this case would be the strongest version of Kaido, so modern day Kaido versus Prime Whitebeard. Whitebeard is the world's strongest man, but Kaido is the world's strongest creature. And there have been a lot of people on both sides out here that say that Kaido is stronger than Whitebeard or vice versa. What is canon, as far as I understand, the Ace Light novel, they actually lean on the favor of Kaido rather than Whitebeard, where they say that in terms of sheer battle power, Kaido in a one-on-one fight is said, through word of mouth and so on, is said to be the strongest. But the reason why Whitebeard is deemed to be the strongest man alive is because he led his pirate life as the strongest individual, if you would. It's like a very weird, ambiguous way of viewing the title of strongest, but many of these titles are just that. They're word of mouth, spread by people, very ambiguous, not necessarily clear. But I would always lean towards Whitebeard because my assumption was that at the time, which is only a few years off from the beginning of the story, when Ace was going around doing his thing, I would assume that Whitebeard is not at his prime strength anymore. He's not as weak as he was in Marineford, but he's still not at his prime strength. If you have a prime strength Whitebeard, I'll lean towards him being stronger than current Kaido, but not by that much. Consider just how much damage, how many people Kaido had to fight to just lose to Luffy ultimately. And then Big Mom, she was still yapping, talking about Roger, talking about Law and Kid, talking about Luffy when she was falling down. After all of the Acme warheads that she grabbed, after the Puncture Willie, after the damn Punk, all these attacks, she was still yapping. She going into the magma chamber, staring it down, saying, I'm not gonna die of this. This ain't gonna kill me. So to me, if Whitebeard wants to fight them 1v1 in his prime, and the same goes for Goldie Roger, who I think is stronger than Whitebeard at his prime, I think that they can get the W for sure. But it will be a very hard-fought W. Whitebeard is going tooth and nail against a peak power Big Mom and a peak power Kaido. 1v1, no shenanigans, no plot twists, just man to man, man to woman. We square up and we just go ham. The evidence is there. I think it absolutely is there. And the idea that's brought up in the ultimate chapter, I do co-sign this too. And I would carry it over if we follow the Eric Toledo S-curve model, the correct model. I would absolutely suggest that in a 2v1, Big Mom and Kaido versus Whitebeard or Roger, Big Mom and Kaido get the W. Absolutely. And we can carry as far as Joyboy himself. If Joyboy were to fight Big Mom and Kaido 2v1, you could argue he gets the W. I'm cool with that in some respects. I am. But it's going to be a very hard fought W. Much harder than fighting Goldie, Roger, or Whitebeard 1v1. And there's actually a good chance that this leans in favor of Big Mom and Kaido. When you're fighting Kaido and Bim at the same time, I don't care who you are, man. You're going to have an extremely hard time to get that W. Whether it be Emu, whether it be Joyboy, Forest God, River God, whatever legendary Pokemon is high out there in the World One Piece. Big Mom and Kaido 2v1, that's gonna be tough. That's gonna be gnarly tough. If Joyboy were to fight against Whitebeard and Roger at their peak powers at the exact same time, 1v2. I mean, bro, I'm sorry, but I'm not even sorry. No apologies here. I'm leaning Roger Whitebeard over Joyboy in a 2v1. Even though we haven't seen Joyboy do a single thing in the story in terms of his feats, in terms of his combat skills, at least the hockey we know is off the charts. But just like Shanks, I'm willing to bet here that Roger also has comparable hockey to Joyboy in some respects. That's what at least I would bet. But even still, Joyboy would lose in a 2v1 fight to Whitebeard and to Roger. Yes, I think he would. Now, if he's the reason why let's say the moons that surround the planet no longer exist, because he just yeeted them into like deep space, okay, we may have to do an addendum to this video. Fair enough. But as it stands right now, I would say that this is a pretty accurate representation of how to view power scaling in One Piece by Eric. There's gonna be, yes, people that are gonna be just way stronger than the hard fights of the past, obviously. I don't see someone like Joyboy really struggling at all with Doflamingo. No, of course not. Absolutely not. The same would, let's say, go for the modern day top tiers though, like people like Akainu, people like Shanks, people like Big Mom or Kaido, people like, modern day Luffy, right? Even Ryoma. I'm willing to say that Mihawk now is probably stronger than Ryoma, but not that much stronger. Probably like maybe a hair or two stronger. So like on the S chart, they'd be like right neck and neck. Like the same way I would view, let's say, Shanks and Goldie Roger, like right neck and neck. Whether they're weaker or stronger to each other, it depends what we see and what we hear about Ryoma in his past versus Mihawk. And the same goes to, let's say, showcasing more of Roger's powers and what he could do in the past, and then more of Shanks' powers and what he could do currently. So yes, again, I do admit that there are some characters that I do see being like a step ahead, even though they're like in the top tier brackets, but in the S curve, they're just further down the S curve. That's really it. But someone like Joyboy, again, I'll be very surprised if Joyboy was so strong to where even a combo of Roger and Whitebeard would be a diff. A crush. He would annihilate Roger and Whitebeard 2v1. If that ever happens again, I'll eat these words. But I think, again, Eric's chart, that is, I believe, on point. Absolutely. So let me know your stance on the subject matter at hand. If you enjoy your boys' video content, give a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and click on that bell to join the notification squad. I'm gonna catch you guys and gals on the flip side.
See you. Bye-bye.